like to go ahead and have those two speakers come forth. The first one is Mr. James Lee. And if you'll come to the podium, Mr. Lee, we'll hear your remarks. And then following Mr. Lee is Aisha Du. And again, coming to the podium. You'll have 2 minutes to speak, Mr. Lee, and the council, if we'll make sure that we can hear what Mr. Lee is saying.
Good evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here in the WCNC Weather Impact Studios. Have a little technical difficulty logging into our graphic system tonight, so we're going to go old school, kind of do it vlog-wise, talk about the gorgeous weather out there. Tim Buckley will be joining me coming up in about 8 minutes or so, and we'll talk more about the cool pattern we've had. We've had some great questions about the upcoming winter season, which we can really start to get into. I feel like once you get to September, people start talking about what is the fall going to look like, and oftentimes people will wonder, hey, did the summer pattern have any impact on the winter weather or vice versa? The long story short, it doesn't, but we'll explain why that is. But the best we could do right now is show you what's happening right now. Jeb, let's do my laptop because I can at least show you current temperatures. This is a look out there right now. So this is a program I use quite a bit at home and kind of for situational awareness. You can see we've got a lot of mid and upper 70s right now across most of the Piedmont. In the mountains, we've got some 60s. What's interesting is there is a cold front and some rain over here in parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. Now that system right there is not really going to get here. It's kind of stuck, and that's why it's actually going to start to warm up. If you were up early this morning or out late last night, it was absolutely beautiful. It was the first what I would call coolish night and morning because there was a little bit of a chill to the air. You might have needed a light jacket or a sweater or a long sleeve shirt at the very least this morning. But temperatures were down into the low and mid 50s, even in and around the Charlotte area. So that's by far the coolest we have been since, you got to go back to like mid-May, the last time we had temperatures that cool. And it's the second time in a week we've been in the 50s. So it has been an incredible stretch of weather. But that rain, what's interesting is that rain isn't going to really try to get here. It's going to kind of get stuck to the west. But what happens is when we see a front get stuck to the west of us, the flow ahead of it is out the southwest. So tomorrow temperatures are going to start warming back up, likely into the low, possibly the mid 80s in a few spots, and certainly by Thursday we'll be in the upper 80s, and by Friday, I hate to tell you this, but the 90s are going to make a little bit of a return, and we'll show you the 7-day forecast here in a minute because I think we can show you that. But the flow is really going to be coming from the southwest. Now, we're watching a series of cold fronts. There's another cold front up here near the Canadian border, and what's interesting about that is there might be a little touch of snow in parts of the Arrowhead of Minnesota with this front. So maybe the first real taste of winter coming down. That front doesn't get here until Monday or Tuesday. So before that front gets here, we're going to see a lot of warmth building here in the southeast. Now, I felt like we jinxed it by talking about the no 90-degree weather for the rest of the season. Our last one was back on the 17th of August. So it's been a while, and that day it was 94. But as we go towards Friday and Saturday, we're going to see those temperatures jumping back up, possibly into the low 90s. Now, I'm going to loop this a couple times, and I'll kind of show you that rain over in Tennessee and Kentucky. It's really not in a big hurry to head our way. In fact, it looks like it's just going to stay over there to the west. Now, as that front gets close on Thursday, there could be some thunderstorms in the mountains. So just a heads up for folks in the mountains, we might see some actual thunderstorms with that coming up on Thursday afternoon. But those storms are going to have a real tough time getting east of the mountains. So two things you're going to notice here in the next few days. Tonight is the last really comfortable, coolish night with temperatures in the 50s, no humidity. Tomorrow, those temperatures start getting back into the low 80s, and the humidity starts to creep up, dew points in the 60s. By Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we could be pushing 90 degrees. In fact, Saturday could be really hot, maybe the hottest since that middle of August little heat bump we had when it was 94. We could be really close to that coming up on Saturday. So, Jeb, let's see if we can show weather one. I know I can't control it, but I think we had, the 10-day forecast up. So that's the last graphic. I have no control over the system remotely in here, but this will show you. Look at that warm up from Thursday into Friday and Saturday. We got a lot going on Saturday. When someone texted us yesterday, thought we had the wrong icons there because App State and Charlotte played each other last Friday, but they both have home games this Saturday, not against each other though. So technically last week that was a home game for Charlotte at Bank of America Stadium. They did not play well. App State really kind of owned them there. So these will be interesting games. UNC is coming to Charlotte on Saturday to play them. So that should be a really interesting game on Saturday, and it's going to be hot Temperatures, again, low 90s possible on Saturday. And Charlotte Ascent, their first game of the season, their home game is on Saturday night as well. So there is a lot going on Saturday, and it's going to be toasty, whether you're up in Boone or whether you're down here in Charlotte watching football or soccer. It is going to be toasty. Now, hopefully that front gets through here on Sunday and Monday, and you'll see that temperatures do start to cool back down closer to 80 degrees. And at this point, we actually could use some rain. It has been a while. I had to look back, and I know Tim's going to show us this in a minute. They haven't had rain for like 18 days or something in Greensboro. For us, it's been about 3 weeks. So it's been a long time since we've had substantial rain. We had all that crazy rain in early August, and then it's like it just stopped raining. So we actually could use some rain right now, and the best chance is probably not going to be until late next week. And even then, it's 20-30%. So the chances of rain are pretty minimal right now as we go into the next 10 days. So hate to say we're going to see the heat come back just a little bit. The only good news I have for you is that it doesn't look like it's going to be crazy hot. It just looks like some low 90s. To me, the more noticeable thing is probably going to be the humidity, because it is going to get a little sticky. I'm not going to say we're going to see air you can wear, dew points around 70-ish, but we are going to see dew points likely back into the low, possibly the mid-60s. So it will feel a tad more humid. And if you can just get through the weekend, we will get back to some cooler and drier weather as we get into next week. So coming up here in about 2 minutes, Tim's going to join me. We're going to talk about the tropics. We'll show you the one tropical wave we're watching. There is a really high likelihood we're going to have Gabrielle at some point this week. We'll talk about the steering currents there. We'll talk about the cool pattern, what that means for the upcoming winter, if it means anything at all. And I'll actually give you kind of a sneak peek. I do an annual winter forecast. I'll tell you some of the things I look at as we get ready for that winter forecast, which it won't come out until likely the end of October, so we got some time, but we can show you some of the previews of some of the things we'll look at. And that's coming up in 2 minutes right after the break. All right, welcome back. Tim Buckley joins me now. Tim, I'm having some graphics issues tonight. We can't remotely log into the Weather Center, so we're going to rely on you. But I know you we're on the same train of thought here, talking about the tropics a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about winter weather and the cool weather we had. But just your thoughts on like this. I don't want to call it a heat wave because it doesn't. That seems like it's not really that true, but it is kind of a mini bump in the temperatures that are heading our way for at least a couple days at the end of the week. I think we're for sure going to hit the 90s here. Do you guys think you might get close to 90 by Saturday?
I heard you in your forecast kind of mentioning that maybe we jinxed this a little bit. But we'd been talking about this so much, and for a while it looked like we would escape without having any sort of big heat kind of returning. But Jeb, I do have this pulled up if you want to just pop up kind of the Futurecast map. Over the next couple of days, I've been calling this, Brad, basically like a 3-day summer. For us, we're going to kind of go back to summer for 3 days of sorts. And I think sometimes what people don't realize is if you have a little bit of a cold front approaching, you actually get a warm-up ahead of it. And so what we're going to see is that, the movement of the pressure systems and, the movement of this front in particular later on this week, Thursday, Friday, lasting into Saturday, it's going to enhance that flow of moisture kind of coming at us from the south. So what we haven't had over the last, how long has it been, Brad? A couple weeks now? We haven't had that steady southerly flow. I was just looking at the time lapse of our clouds today in Greensboro, and they're all coming in from the north. So that tells you that we've had that northerly flow for a while, which has been keeping us so cool. And then by the end of the week, you are going to see a return to not just the heat, but also the humidity, right? So we've been avoiding that for a while. Now we're going to see those dew points coming back. So spoiled with the 40s dew points, spoiled with the 50s dew points, probably have a couple days where they're going to return, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a big. People probably are going to notice the humidity going up more than the temperature because it's supposed to be a little bit warm this time of year. But you're so right, Tim. I think especially when you get into the fall, and this happens in the spring, when you get these fronts coming down, it's the yin and yang. They're pulling warm air ahead of them before they bring the cool air in. So it looks like the first couple fronts don't quite get here, so they kind of get hung up in Tennessee. And that flow from the southwest, I jokingly call it the blowtorch because that's when we get really hot weather around here. And the southwest flow is like it sets up for a couple of days, and it certainly does look warm. I think Saturday in particular for us looks like we might see some low 90s down this way just because it's so dry too. There's no moisture in the soil or plants. I know you had a great graphic about how long it's been since you guys have seen rain. It made me think, and I had to look back. Now we're not quite as long as you, but I think we had like a half an inch back on like the 17th or 18th, but it's been a while after that wet start to the month.
Yeah, it really has. And kudos to the folks over at the Southeast Regional Climate Center. They kind of pinged me on this one and said, hey, just so you know, you had a big stretch here and it's still going. What they called my attention to, Brad, was interesting. We finished dry in Greensboro for the last 17 days of August. And that ties for the longest ever dry stretch in the month of August. So for our area anyway. And this is a little bit of a data thing. I think, our data here is at Piedmont Triad Airport in Greensboro. Parts of our area have seen some rain over the last 19 days, but the official record-keeping site has not. And so we're approaching, including today, 3 weeks without any rainfall, at least up here. And, it sounds almost silly to say because we were so wet and we were talking about so much flooding for so long back in July. That's just not the case anymore, though. So things are browning up a little bit. Maybe, you could call it a flash drought. It's not a real drought.
Yeah.
But we are seeing, this is over the last 10 years. I went back to 2015. This is our third longest dry spell. And depending on what happens on Thursday, we could pass number 2 on the list as well. So dry weather has crept back in. I was happy about it because I don't have to cut my grass quite as much, but I know people would like to have more help watering the garden for sure.
Yeah, and we're almost to that point. Usually after Labor Day, in the last couple of years, people wait later, but the overseeding and aeration of the lawns is coming up here, and so people are probably going to want some rain to overseed their lawns here in the fall because it really sets you up for the next spring. What's interesting, Tim, is August is a pretty wet month, so to have that stretch happen in August is pretty wild. And I always say this about rain. I know during that wet spell, people are like, I don't want to hear the word drought. And I'm like, the thing about rainfall, it's kind of like food. It doesn't really matter how much you gorged 3 weeks ago. If you don't eat for 2 weeks, you're going to starve. And when you get rain, you want consistency of the rain. It's not how much you get, it's the consistency. You rather have steady rain every week, at least a little bit, without these wild extremes, which are always problematic for your lawn and garden when you have a whole bunch and then you don't have any.
And that's something we talked about, when we were previewing the fall foliage too, is you'd like to have that consistency of rainfall. And so if you are going into some of these drier stretches, you might have some more heat stress or drought stress, I should say, with the trees. I don't know how much of that we're seeing already, but it could factor into it if it continues a little while longer, at least up here. What's interesting, though, wasn't your August really wet just down the road in Charlotte?
Yeah, we had 7.5 inches of rain. That was way above normal, but just like you guys, it all fell the first 2 weeks. I was just looking. Our last measurable rainfall was back on August 22nd, so not quite as long as your stretch, but and that was only at the airport. Like you, I remember that day. That was a pop-up shower that only hit the airport. It did not rain in most of the area. You really got to go back to about your same time, around the 14th or 15th, when there was substantial rain. So, it's been really dry. And the fact that the dew points have been so low, it's actually helped dry things out even more because evaporation rates have been really accelerating. Now, one thing I've noticed, and I don't know how many of your viewers have chimed in on this, Tim, but I think that wet start to August and then the dry pattern, the ragweed is pretty bad right now down here. The ragweed is really kind of spiked in our area. And I was like, man, even me, I was like, I'm starting to feel it because I used to have ragweed allergies as a kid, and they seem to be coming back now. But I think it's all that rain in the early part of the month grew all that ragweed, and now it dried out. Now it's blowing all over the place.
And it's kind of the one part of the allergy season that we probably think about the least. We always think about the spring, maybe not so much the summer, but the fall ragweed season is always, I think, kind of a surprise. It happens every year, but it's not something that you think about. It's also not something you can see. You're not washing the car that way. Jeff, I've got a graphic here if you want to pull it up of just kind of the timeline of things, the different months that the different pollens tend to kind of happen. So we really think about the tree pollen, and that's, boy, oh boy, that is the biggest one we see. Most people are affected by it in April and May, and it's really not until the summer that it tails off completely. But ragweed time, that's now. That's August and into September a little bit too. So if you're feeling that way, if your eyes are burning up or sneezing, it might not be a cold. It could just be the allergies this time of year. So they're up there currently.
Yeah, and I want to briefly talk about the tropics because there's some signs, and we talked about this yesterday. We've got this tropical wave that's got a 70% chance of development now. It's still way out there, so I want folks to remember, it's 7 days from getting to the middle of the Atlantic, so we still got a long ways to go. But there are signs, and you're seeing it in some of the long-range guidance, that, the tropics are going to start getting more active here probably in about a week or so, especially this may be the first in a couple that we start to see bubble up here in the Atlantic.
Yeah, it does seem that way. I can pull up the latest satellite now. There's nothing that's formed yet, but as Brad was saying, about a 70% chance of a storm developing, over the next week. So that's not to say which day it would happen or when exactly you're going to see that. But basically, Brad, they kind of just tend to up these chances bit by bit, day by day. And we've gone from, I think it was 40% yesterday up to 70% today. It's pretty rare that at this point you would have that level of confidence and then nothing form. So I would say, don't you think by the end of the week we'll probably have Gabrielle?
Yeah, and the conditions are really favorable for this developing. It looks like one of those slow cookers, like almost like we got something in the crock pot out there. It's going to take a while, but it's definitely going to develop because it's moving into a favorable environment. And it's still something we want people to monitor, obviously, Tim. But this is just looking at the pattern long range and where this is forming. This has got a high chance of recurving. The question always is, where does that recurvature happen? Does it happen before the Caribbean or after? But there's a pretty high probability that this is going to recurve at some point, especially where it's at. And and that's a great map because that kind of shows you, it's a 2-week process if that thing develops right now before it would even threaten us, if it did at all.
Yeah, so at this point in the Atlantic, and this is always a guide, it's never gospel, but we're at about 10-day range from where it is, maybe longer. If it were ever to even come close, like Brad was saying, whenever a storm's out there, the odds always are best for a recurve. Yeah. We remember the ones that don't, but there's always a better chance than not of it moving away from us. Yeah. They tend to They tend to make you sweat a little bit, though, don't you think? So
Yeah.
I remember with Aaron, boy, oh boy, that was going to be a recurve all the way. And it did,
Yeah.
but it made you sweat for sure
did.
for a couple of days. And they can sometimes, the models have a hard time knowing just how strong that ridge might be of high pressure in the Atlantic. And at this point in the game, it would be silly to write anything off. But
Yeah.
I think we'll want to keep an eye on it. And like you said, it would probably still be about 10 days away, which takes you right up to the climatological peak of
Yeah.
hurricane season, which is September 10th.
Yeah, you really, maybe next week we start really watching closely to see what develops out there. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think statistically, like 2/3 of all storms that form there tend to recurve, but we think about the 1/3 that don't. And those are usually the long track big storms that affect
Right.
us. And because they're usually not puny storms when they form that far out and make it all the way to the United States.
Now, we don't have any spaghetti models to show just yet, Brad, right? Like
Yeah.
they haven't designated it as an invest, at least at this point. I wonder what is it that, for the viewers, when do they determine when it gets that designation and we're going to put models on this thing? It seems like we could be at that point already, but it's not.
Yeah, usually about this, when they see the percentage up there, and remember, it's really, the forecasters have to designate it as invest areas so the models can run on it, and the Navy has a big part of this as well. I usually always kind of look to see what the Navy's doing with those. But I think you're probably right. I think either tonight or tomorrow you're going to see this designated as an invest area. Start running some guidance on it, because usually about 70% probability means it's going to form out there. And you make a good point about us heading towards the peak of the season. It's crazy to think the peak day is actually next week, September 10th. It is wild that it's such a sharp incline to there. And then we're in that peak all the way through really the middle of October. We have like a secondary peak there around the middle of October. But this is kind of the core. This is when all the big storms tend to happen, late August, September, early October. And don't forget, last year at this point, I actually looked back today. It was something I made a conscious effort to go to. We had a lull in mid-September to mid-August, to early September, and then it was like one after another around the 10th or 11th, and in there was Helene, and it finished up with Milton going into October, and then October we had 4 more storms. So it's kind of wild when you look at the number of storms last year and where they occurred. Very heavily backloaded with September and early October. Not many early on, except for Beryl, obviously, which was the earliest Category 5 on record. But it was a weird season last year, and this season is very weird as well, Tim. It's kind of odd. We've had a bunch of storms, but they've been spaced out, and there's been these big breaks in between.
Big breaks in between, and not really equal spatially so much. Like there's not been that much in the Gulf for one reason or another. You've had a good amount on the eastern side of things, and we can't forget about Chantal either. That's been the one storm that really made a mess of North Carolina, particularly in the Piedmont between Raleigh and Greensboro. It's only been a couple of months, but boy, oh boy, that one was a huge mess that people are still cleaning up from. So it's always the ones that hit that you remember. You don't remember at all the ones that stay out to sea, and they tend to make up a lot of the seasonal stats for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to kind of transition here. We had a great question yesterday. I think it was either yesterday, maybe we got it last week, but we didn't get a chance to answer it, Tim. But we had a really good question from one of our viewers about the cool snap at the end of August and early September now, whether or not that has any impact on the winter forecast. You know how people love winter here. There's always this, like, we're having this kind of summer. It could be a hot summer, cool summer, whatever. Everybody wants to know, what does that mean for the upcoming winter? And I know you did a little digging for Greensboro, and I can chime in on some other things, but what did you find for Greensboro about having a cool August versus what the winter meant?
Okay, so for up here, we did have a top 10 coolest August. And that was the case for a good chunk of North Carolina. So I just did a very simple, crude data analysis of this. We're going to take those 10 Augusts and we'll look at what happened the following winters. And so what we found was that in most of those following winters, but not all, it tended to be a little cooler than average. You had highs and lows within there, but if you average those out, the following winter did tend to be about 1 to 2 degrees cooler than average around here. For the snow, which is even more chaotic, it did tend to show a little bit snowier than average by about 1 to 2 inches. Now, I will say there were 2 winters of the 10 that had no snowfall. which is actually hard to do for Greensboro.
That's really hard,
But
yeah.
there were five that had double-digit snowfalls.
Ooh.
So if you want to take this stat and run with it and tell your friends, go for it. I'm not really giving it the News 2 seal of approval here, because I don't know that this is any sort of causation versus correlation.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that August really makes a difference to what the weather pattern does in the winter, and I think that you probably agree with that, right?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot because I've done a seasonal winter forecast for like 20 years now, and I get that question a lot. And I'm a scientist like you, so I'm not going to go on what I think. I'm going to go look at the same thing, and there just isn't a lot. Like you said,
Yeah.
there's a couple where they line up, but there's really no statistical correlation that you could point to and say this means that. And a lot of it just has to do with the summer pattern is so detached from the winter pattern. And I always like to say, that's why I hate when I see all these almanac forecasts come out in the summer. I'm like, we're not even in fall. Let's get to fall first and then look at the pattern in the fall. And one of the things I look at quite a bit, and there is a very good scientific correlation, snowfall in October in Eurasia, when I'm talking about Siberia, northern parts of Asia, when they get a lot of snow in the fall, Tim, we tend to have cold and snowier winters on the East Coast. So if there's one thing that I look at in the fall, it's like, is it snowy and cold over there? And Jeb, bring up the map. I'm going to show you the globe. And why is that important? Because our cold air, Tim, comes from the other side of the globe. It comes from over in Siberia, comes over the pole, and usually comes into North America. So our source region for cold air this winter, which is always weird why I think people look at acorns and woolly worms and stuff locally. The winter weather isn't made locally. It's made up there. And so I look for I look for information of what's happening in the cold source region, and then from a storm standpoint, what's going on in the Pacific. That's the subtropical jet stream. That's going to bring us the storm. So keep an eye on those two parts of the world if you're interested on what's going to happen this winter. Of course, we will talk a lot about winter weather likely over the coming weeks, but we're out of time tonight, Tim. Thanks for everything. Thanks for your help on the graphics. We'll see you tomorrow.
You got it.